So let's sort of start a little bit with, um, I've done a lot of research and background reading on Lyft, and it's sort of interesting. I keep learning new snippets, but you started with this company called Zimride, if I get the name correctly. And so walk us through the evolution of Lyft from where you started to where you are now.
Okay, so I think you have to zoom way out. Our founders are Logan Green and John Zimmer. And Logan is a Los Angeles native, grew up suffering through a lot of traffic on LA highways. And John Zimmer grew up in the East Coast in Connecticut. And both of them became really fascinated with the challenges that are facing our country in transportation from two very different perspectives. Logan, very much about looking at utilization and logistics. He is kind of most notably early in his career, while he was a student at UCSB, he caught the attention of the Santa Barbara Transit Authority, became the youngest member of their advisory team.
Interesting.
And so he's been doing some innovative things for over a decade in transportation. John, on the other coast, was really looking at hospitality and tourism. So he went to Cornell's School for Hospitality. And he kind of zoomed out and looked at transportation and said, if transportation were a hotel, the automobile would be the worst run hotel ever. It's just a terrible asset class. So today, despite $283 million or $1 billion a year that is spent on advertising by the automotive manufacturers as this symbol of freedom, we have 96% underutilization of the automobile. So 4% we're using it, 96% it's parked. And then when we do use it, 80% of the seats are left empty. So here I am driving my car alone, surrounded by thousands and thousands of other people that are alone in their cars too. And both of them thought that there was an opportunity to really solve this problem. They got connected to each other on Facebook, where through a friend, Logan was already working on this concept called Zimride. And the genesis of the idea for Zimride was a trip to Zimbabwe that Logan took, where they don't have very much public infrastructure for transit. And basically out of necessity, they have these small jitney buses that are weaving in and out of the capital city, Kahare, picking up and dropping off passengers. And Logan was really struck with this concept that this could have a profound effect on how Americans travel if you could bring this back to the United States. And so John was introduced to him, and they started working on the idea while John was still on the East Coast working at Lehman Brothers, 2006 to 2008. He has an incredible sense of timing. So Zimride, the concept was really around long-distance ride sharing. So if I'm a student that is studying in the fabulous campus of UC Irvine, and I am trying to get home to Bakersfield on the weekend, I can get matched with the other student, and we can share the cost of that ride. We're basically selling seats. So it's kind of the next generation, if you will, of the bulletin board or the Craigslist posting. And so that company was started in 2007 and operated until 2012. It was actually during that time when I met John and Logan. I was working at another company, and they were trying to recruit me to come over and take a look at Zimride and help them expand their campus solutions. They were already deployed on about 140 university and colleges across the country, and they thought that there was a big opportunity in the corporate market. So I come in and I meet these guys. This is early summer 2012. Lyft did not exist yet, but they were playing with this idea. And I can remember John telling me about it, and he said, David, this is going to change the world. This is going to change everything. Anybody with a car, any of these cars that are driving by, any one of them could come and pick you up, which I thought was terrifying. And so then he said, and we're building a community, because Zimride had a very human focus to it from the beginning. So you're going to sit in the front seat, not the back seat. And when you get in, you're going to fist bump with your driver.
We can fist bump.
We can fist bump. And because we are really trying to be in service of each other. And he's like, but that's not even the best part. And the whole company would have fit on the stage. And so he ran into one of the closets, and he came back with a giant pink fuzzy mustache. And he said, David, all the cars are going to have these on the front. So I walked out of that meeting thinking, these kids are lunatics. This is never going to work. So I'm of course, an incredible visionary, and decided not to join Zimride in 2012. But we stayed in touch, and I really watched and admired the company that they were building. They released Lyft, and it immediately had just an unbelievable response in market. It was the first peer-to-peer offering, and they pretty much had to take all of their Zimride resources and apply them on this new business concept. And I think that, when we're talking about digital transformation, this was one of the hardest things that I think Logan and John had to go through, is they had a successful business in Zimride. It was already profitable. It was a going concern. They had raised capital for it. They had a community built around it. And they asked themselves, what would we do now if we reset? If we restarted knowing everything that we know now, what would we build? And that's where Lyft came from. They ultimately sold Zimride to Enterprise Rent-A-Car.
Right.
It continues on across campuses across the country. But Zimride is really kind of a close cousin to the Lyft company.
That's fascinating because one of the things people may not realize actually is that David sort of put that in there, but the first pure peer-to-peer sharing in cars was actually Lyft, because its competition, actually, if you remember, was the black car service. So you were really, that's just ordering a limo or a nicer car through your smartphone. And I actually remember the first time I saw the Lyft pink mustache.
Yeah.
And I was taking a run near San Diego Airport, don't ask me why. And there was this young woman parked there in sort of an average car with this pink mustache, and because of the research that I do, I went and, I say I did research, but I actually interrogated her. And I said, what are you doing? Like, is this working for you? I mean, I knew what the company was, didn't know whether it worked. And she says, are you kidding me? This is the best thing I've ever done. And I said, why? She said, well, I'm a college kid, and I have time free on weekends. I just park myself outside San Diego Airport, and I make a ton of money every weekend. Yeah. And there were not so many cars to it. So you sort of inspired, I guess, or I don't know if inspired is the right word, but sort of motivated the competition to sort of match your offering. But with that, I want to sort of address the elephant in the room first, because everybody knows the big competitor that Lyft faces. Okay, I never said that. Nobody knows the competitor that Lyft faces. They've been on the news a lot recently for all the wrong reasons. And I know that your culture is sort of quite different. And more broadly, I mean, even beyond sort of your immediate competition, technology often gets accused of sort of not appreciating sort of some of these sort of more sort of the diversity issues, or whatever, however you want to characterize them. And I know that sort of Lyft is a very values-driven organization, so I want to get a sense from you of what it's like to be at Lyft, how you guys operate on a day-to-day basis. Not about the business model, just about sort of the culture.
Yeah, so let me maybe connect the dots between Zimride and Lyft today. Okay. And then I will address that. It's an important question, and we think a unique differentiator. So I joined Lyft in August of 2015, kind of got my senses about me and saw really how big of an impact this could have on the world. And today we have 1,500 employees. We're in 10 cities where we have offices. We have about 700,000 drivers. We have about 19 million rides per week. We're on approximately a $2.5 billion run rate. And we are taking market share like crazy. From March of 15 to March of 16, we grew 70% in our market share across the top 20 ride-sharing markets in the country. So we were having a tremendous 2016 and have continued to stay laser focused on growing our business here in 2017, despite all of the headlines. Those are pretty hard to ignore, but I think it does put a highlight on Lyft as just having a different approach to doing business. From the outset, John and Logan have done a remarkable job of establishing the Lyft values. And it's really about a concept that our mission and our values matter more than growth at any cost. And we have a higher purpose of really transforming the cities that we live in and creating a society, an economic opportunity that is greater than Lyft by itself. And so we think that's a big responsibility, and we think it deserves a lot of care and attention. So the Lyft values that are really, preeminent around hiring, around decisions that we make there's 4 core values: uplift others. That's really about...
Spelled with the Y or an I?
It's actually with an I. The LIFT.com was not available when Lyft became available.
That's the reason.
It turns out that's owned by Otis Elevators.
Little trivia question when you go home tonight.
That's right.
Ask your families.
The second value is be yourself, which is really about living authentically and really about the importance of inclusiveness and diversity in the communities that we operate in our employee base and in our driver community. And then make it happen and create fearlessly. So really kind of tying back to the way that we do innovation inside the company. And I think that over time, it's becoming, it's revealing itself as the competitive differentiator. We put an immense focus on treating we say we treat you better, which is a principle of focus on our driver community. And we believe fundamentally that if we keep investing in our driver community and providing them with a lot of care, a lot of tools to be successful, that it's a difference that they notice, and then they're going to treat our passenger community better. And you've done some of your own first-hand research. I encourage everybody to do their own, but 8 out of 10 drivers that will drive for both platforms will say that they prefer driving for Lyft. And it's for those investments that we've made in these operating principles.
So can you talk about some of the investments you've made for the drivers?
Yeah, so we are the only app that allows for in-app tipping. And that represents a considerable amount of their earnings potential, 14%. I think yesterday we announced that we've now paid out over $200 million in tips to our driver community. Second thing is we heard loud and clear that over 80% of our driver community are what we consider casual drivers. They drive less than 20 hours a week. So flexibility is really important, but also in their pay. So we created, in partnership with Stripe, same-day pay. So you can go out, you can drive, and you can earn the same day. So if you are a graduate student, a veteran, a retiree, in between jobs, you can go and earn and really take care of your basic needs of living the same day. And then on top of that, in partnership with General Motors, we created a program called Express Drive. And that came out of really listening to our community and a data-driven approach to looking at applications. And we saw that approximately 25% of the applications to drive on the Lyft platform were rejected because the person did not have the vehicle that would meet our standards. Now that could be because their car was too old. It could be because they didn't pass the 19-point vehicle inspection for safety reasons. Or it could be that you drive a 2-door Miata and it's just not really functionable for ride sharing. And so we now allow through 18 locations, Express Drive hubs, someone to go in and for the same day be able to take out a near new Hertz vehicle or GM vehicle and start driving on the Lyft platform and earning. And if they drive over 65 rides in a week, they don't pay anything.
Yeah. That's fantastic because when you are trying to uplift, to use your phrase, and my colleague will be presenting some research on how this is actually helping sort of underemployed people, this is really important. I grew up in India, and when Unilever first came to India, they didn't understand why the family package household stuff was not selling.
Yeah.
And it was because people just didn't have the money to buy supplies for a month. They were literally shopping day to day. So this is a sort of very sort of pertinent example. And some of your drivers obviously need that kind of help, as we will also support with our research. But in terms of your growth strategy, I mean, you talked about market share. Can you help us understand the strategies you're deploying to gain market share?
Well, we fundamentally believe that there's table stakes that you have to meet to be competitive in a market. So first of all, you have to be available. So when I joined in August 15, we were in 65 cities. We were at 200 cities ending last year. We've added 100 in the first quarter of this year. And so city expansion, being available everywhere that people travel and need transportation is criteria number one. The second is really around ETAs. People are pretty fickle, and in this on-demand world, we know that you have to provide a 3 to 5 minute ETA, and now on average across all markets that Lyft operates, we can get you a car in 3 minutes. And then third is really around price competition. You have to be competitive. There can't be an imbalance. Once those those criteria are met, we really believe that it comes down to a brand preference. And that's where it goes back to our more human-driven approach and an emphasis on values and treating our driver community with care and respect. And when we do that, it turns out to be a difference that our passengers will also notice.
So this 3 minute ETA really strikes me, because all of us here are old enough to have taken a yellow cab. And you call them and say they're 10 minutes away, and then they're nowhere, and 15 minutes go by, and then now they're 20 minutes away. So this is remarkable, and I'm curious to learn about the sophistication of your platform, because there's a lot of data, there's a lot of algorithms to make this happen. I don't know how we would illustrate that for this audience, but I'm
it's
trying to
magic.
There we go. You're stealing my phrase.
It's just magic. Yeah, I liked your comment about that this morning. I think that the magic is in really taking something that actually behind the scenes is increasingly complex. Now, the first Lyft app to create was built in 3 weeks. Now, it is many, many times more sophisticated today. Looking at managing pay, dynamic pricing, matching. So our algorithm will run 1 million times per minute to find the right match between our driver community and our rider community. And then you have pay and fraud. These are all things that are kind of the underpinnings, along with maps and navigation and route planning. And so these underpinnings are really what make up the platform. And it's all very service-oriented, and many of these services are now exposed as application programming interfaces, APIs that are providing us the ability to integrate into a wide variety of other systems through a host of different partnerships.
Yeah, one of the things I think is, at least in my experience, underappreciated is, you can talk about digital transformation strategy up here, but there's a whole set of technology implications about how you design your platforms, how you open up sort of the APIs, and how you use other. Like, for example, people don't, you think about this, the knowledge infrastructure that's available to us. So Google Maps, for example. I mean, without Google Maps or some other mapping application, you can't really have the growth that these companies are seeing. It mystifies me, because in India, nobody ever used maps, because the streets, you can't even read the street signs. They're written in some unusual scripts and very small. And you find that these companies work just fine because Google Maps has done the job for us. So it may not technically be open source, but if you look at sort of these patterns of innovation, there's data and algorithms that you're borrowing from somewhere else, and the stuff that you're contributing back, all of which is sort of growing out this ecosystem. And this is what we're talking about, the core competence being software and sort of your know-how, really. But I want to switch to a little bit, and if you guys could prepare questions, I have one more question for David. So, everybody's got self-driving cars on the mind, but like what, I mean, and yes, they will emerge, and I know your CEO said ultimately fleets will be run by companies like Lyft, and I tend to agree with that point of view, but what's your sort of rollouts? How do you think about this longer period of time? I mean, even when they first come out, they're going to work in certain geographies, and who knows how long regulation will take to keep up.
Yeah. So it's incredibly exciting. In the last, call it 15 months, you have seen virtually every automotive manufacturer, every major hardware manufacturer, and every major software company literally elbow their way to the table. And it's because it's a $10 trillion global opportunity, transportation. That's when you look at all the different parts of the industry: automotive sales, automotive service, parts and accessories, insurance. And so there is a big opportunity, and that's before you even account for the commerce and content of what could potentially be the fifth screen.
Right.
So not surprisingly, there's a lot of people that are creating a point of view. I don't think that it's all that well known yet. We are partnered very closely with General Motors. Right. There's three parts to their investment in Lyft. They made a $500 million investment in a $1 billion round in January of last year. And one part is as an investment. The second part was to roll out the Express Drive program. And the third part is about how we team together to provide a solution to riders that includes autonomous vehicles. And we don't believe that an autonomous vehicle is going to just drop right out of the sky and be able to fulfill 100% of the Lyft rides. It's going to be, as you're describing, in a geofence capacity with domain restrictions. It has to be under only fair weather, only under certain time restrictions, maybe on fixed routes even. And we know both your origin as well as your destination, and so we can match you to an autonomous vehicle where it is appropriate. And so over time, we are putting a stake in the ground and saying that in the next 5 years, the majority of Lyft rides will be delivered autonomously, and by 2025, it will be the complete end of car ownership inside of US cities. I think that there is a lot still to figure out along the way around that economic model and what the operating systems look like to deliver it. But it's incredibly exciting, and it can have a profound effect on our environment, our economies, and our society about just improving the cities that we live in.
So just imagine a city without, and this is actually borrowing from his CEO sort of musings. It's called The Third Transportation Revolution on Medium. If you haven't read it, please read it. But just imagine a city without cars, without parking lots, without parking structures, more green spaces. Think about all the street parking we use at home and having front lawns instead of garages. And
I mean, you think about that. So 14% of urban settings are parking lots. 30% of the traffic that is in our way is looking for parking spots. It's incredible. It's wasteful. And there is a better path. And we think that we're at this crossroads where there's an opportunity to really reimagine our cities and design them, what John says, around people instead of the automobile.
So with that, let me sort of see if there's any questions from the audience. We're having real trouble with the lights. So do you have a mic?
Gideon Corey, Trians. The question is about how you address demand. So personally, I had an experience coming to LAX, 1 a.m., nothing to find around. No Uber, no Lyft, everybody's asleep. Was a couple of airplanes, they landed late, and you could wait for an hour and a half. How you address that demand in a system where it's actually voluntary. You not make an obligation your drivers to be at 1:30 a.m. at LAX.
Yeah, it's a great question. So we face one of the biggest challenges of running a business like Lyft is matching supply with demand. It's achieving equilibrium. Otherwise, you have churn on both sides. You have an unhappy customer over here, or you have unhappy drivers that are not getting requests for rides. And in either case, they're fickle and they will churn off of the system. One of the things around Airport Ride is we listen to our community. I lead the teams that work with all of our enterprises, consumer partnerships of all kinds, healthcare, campus solutions. And what we heard from them, particularly for the road warrior business traveler, is they love the convenience of on-demand transportation. However, they miss the reliability of a scheduled ride. And so we introduced a scheduled ride feature in San Francisco first, about 2 quarters ago, and now that's broadly rolling out across the country. So I'm confident that over time, as we introduce that scheduled ride feature, that use case will get solved for. The other side of it is really around incentives. So first of all is being able to schedule it. The second part is making sure that there's a driver that's going to accept it. And we have a variety of different incentive programs, everything from bonuses to average hourly guarantees that will ensure that when we have peak loads of demand, think about 18,000 people leaving an event at one time and everybody outside requesting a Lyft ride and no other app. That is a real logistical problem that requires both behavioral science as well as logistics and software. So I'm sorry you had that experience, but I think that you'll see that it gets solved for, and I'd be happy to show you how you can use the scheduled ride feature after we're done here today.
Question in the middle?
So as somebody who's worked in image processing before, I know it's not perfect. We talked about Tesla when they introduced the software patch, and I said, uh-oh, there's going to be something that happens. Are you looking at putting in an active radar or something like that in there so that you can make sure when image processing fails that you're not going to run into something?
So our approach on autonomy is probably a good analog would be the wireless industry. So if you look at Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, in order to operate, you need a carrier, you need the operating system, and then you need the hardware manufacturer. What you're describing, lasers, LiDAR, radar, high-resolution optical cameras, sensors, and then mapping software is all really in the hardware field. You just saw a tremendous acquisition of Mobileye by Intel. That's what they do. That is really going to be delivered by our partner that's been an automotive manufacturer for over 100 years. We, in this equation, are very much the operating system, the interaction between the fleet and the user, as well as the network carrier. So we imagine ourselves as providing you with that mileage plan, that subscription agreement that you can get as many miles or as few miles as you want, ride with ultimate flexibility. But we're going to leave the hardware manufacturing up to General Motors and other partners.
Other questions?
Yes, thank you. So very intrigued by your comments about how you keep your drivers happy and how that's a competitive advantage for you. Can you talk a little bit more about that and also think about that in terms of lessons learned that could be applied to other industries, such as real estate agents or insurance or things like that?
It's a great question. I think that because of John and Logan really believing in this community approach, our first Lyft drivers were actually all Zimride users. We recruited out of that community. John and Logan independently interviewed the first 1,000 riders or drivers on the platform. And then we created a mentor program that meant that every single driver that ever was allowed onto the Lyft platform had a one-to-one experience, and talking about the Lyft way and the Lyft culture and the Lyft values. And I think that that's had an incredible effect and created leverage in our system and in our onboarding. Now, in terms of the lessons learned out of there, I think that what we have heard is that they want to be treated fairly and equitably. They want transparency in communications around changes to the business. They value the flexibility that is inherent in the sharing economy and the gig economy. And any of the things that we can do to enable on any of those vectors is going to improve the relationship between us and that community. And I think that's probably inherently a good way to manage any community. A community of your employees, a community of your suppliers, or potentially even your customers.
I think one of the most interesting things on that note that I read, and tell me if the statistic is correct, that there's far more Lyft rides that end with the driver getting sort of a 5-star rating than I think than other companies, which speaks, I think, to sort of what you said earlier with driver satisfaction with and providing better service.
Your words, not mine.
Okay. All right. I think I'm going to get a free Lyft ride after today. Let's talk any more. Oh, that's a question over here.
Yeah, maybe somewhat related to the previous question about other sectors. It occurs to me that that the Google Street View in front of my house hasn't been updated in about 2 years. And so, I love the gentleman's question about, the real estate industry, and even like just getting kind of a somewhat real-time view of, state of properties. And the fact that you guys, in San Francisco, you're running those grids all day, every day. And there's like almost a persistence of potentially data that could be incepted through what your drivers are doing through the Google slipstream. So just things like that beyond just getting people from point A to point B. Any thoughts or comments on that as applies to other industries?
Yeah, there's an argument that the biggest benefactor of the shift from individual car ownership to transportation as a service is actually going to be the real estate development industry. And when you think of all the opportunities in those 14% of parking lots and the data that we're capturing that could be offered to make better decisions around open space, new business development, and housing, there's a tremendous opportunity there. And we're just beginning to see the real estate industry come to the table. The Irvine company is running a pilot with Lyft that is really looking at, instead of going out and building even more parking spots or implementing fixed shuttle routes, which tend to be very expensive and not all that well utilized, is there an opportunity to subsidize with Lyft credits instead to residents or lessees of Irvine properties. So I think that we're just scratching the surface on many of those use cases. As another one that, I have to admit I didn't see until I got into Lyft is around the healthcare industry. Today, 3.6 million Americans miss their doctor's appointment every year because they don't have access to affordable, reliable transportation. And so we've been partnering with many of the nation's leading healthcare organizations to provide some of the most vulnerable rides to doctor's appointments, to dialysis appointments, to get prescription drugs refilled. And today, that's a $4 billion industry alone that is reimbursed in our Medicaid programs. So we're just beginning to find ways where now that you have a network of ground transportation that's consistently delivered across the entire country and powered by software and enabled with APIs, there's opportunities to really consume transportation as a service to tackle challenges that maybe we really couldn't even address ever before. And that is really an exciting opportunity for us. So real estate, healthcare are two that we're looking very closely at as emerging markets.
And I think Meals on Wheels may be your next market, unfortunately. Let me ask you a last question. This is sort of a cutthroat business. It's like lots of competition, and I see you have partnerships internationally as well. Sort of, what can we expect next from Lyft? Like, what's next? What's your where do you see the real big opportunities here? I mean, one is obviously what you just talked about.
That's not enough, Vijay?
No. I need a little secret for the audience. They can say, we know something about Lyft.
We're really excited about continuing to enhance the experience. And one of the things that I just kind of glanced over is that in the autonomous world, you're going to get an opportunity to completely reimagine what getting from point A to point B looks like. The entire configuration of an automobile is going to change completely, where we're going to go from facing here with a steering wheel to perhaps you and I could have this conversation on the way to San Francisco.
I saw a concept car with a treadmill in it.
I don't want to do that. But I could see how some folks would. So we think that there's going to be some opportunities for a lot of different hospitality kinds of experiences where maybe I want to work. Maybe I want to watch sports entertainment. Perhaps I'm going to have pick up that Netflix binge on my way in my commute. So we're really pretty excited about the opportunities to differentiate around experience. And one of the earliest examples that we have around that is what we call our AMP. You might have begun to see it in Los Angeles. It's a device that sits in the car. It will color match with LED lighting onto your phone. So if you've gotten to that LAX airport ride, and there's a sea of ride-sharing options and lots of Priuses that are available,
Exactly.
how do you find which one's yours? And we match you purple to the purple amp that's in the car.
That's fantastic.
And now I get in, and it says, "Hello, BJ," so you know that it is your Lyft ride that you're getting into. That's a leading indicator of just some of the opportunities that we think are going to exist to enhance that experience.
So it sounds so simple, but all of us who've stood at that LAX line know there's like literally 25 Priuses and 25 people waiting, and you can't find yours, and you're getting these messages like, if you're not there in 3 minutes, I said, I'm gonna check
It's so
all
stressful.
these license plates.
Yeah.
But what
And that is, because ride sharing has become so successful, that last 50 feet is a new problem to solve.
Exactly. But where I was really trying to lead you, David, but you didn't oblige, was this, in Dubai, they're going to have on-demand helicopters. And I was hoping he would say, we can get our own jetpacks one of these days.
Yeah. I'm very much a latchkey kid that grew up in the 80s, so I had a steady diet of mac and cheese and after-school programming, Battlestar Galactica, Star Trek, The Jetsons. I love flying cars, so there's no bigger advocate and evangelist inside of Lyft for flying cars than I am.
So with that, Lyft did great things from Lyft. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much.